지금부터
From now on, let us start the session on sustainable economic growth. Keywords is the gender equality. I'm your MC, Jeju. Then let me introduce the moderator. Her name is Lee Bok-sil, and she was working at the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Welfare, the Gender Equality and Family. Let me hand my mic to the moderator, Lee Bok-sil.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lee Bok-sil, and I will be moderating the session. I'm from the WCD Korea. As you know, the gender equality is critical for the development of the national growth and to achieve the economic growth. No one will deny that. Well, everybody knows that, but how to implement that? What kind of strategy can it be implemented? In Korea, the gender equality index is almost the lowest in the world, even though we have a high GDP country. So that implies very important questions to Korea. So for that matter, in this session, we would like to talk about how we can achieve the gender equality and how we can actually implement in our business activities. So let me briefly introduce today's panels. So we have a Ambassador Pro Desberg of Royal Norwegian Embassy to Korea. And next we have a CEO John Lee of Merit Asset Management. So you may wonder how the CEO of Merit Asset Management can be related to the gender equality, and you will see how soon. And now we have a Lee Hyun-suk, Gender Equality Policy Administrator of Jeju Special Self-Governing Province. Now we have a Lee Hyun-young, Dean at Kookmin University. She was the first dean. So she is a very symbolic person. And she will be introducing the best practices in Korea. And now we have President Seo of Women in Innovation. She was just promoted, and she was the first one in KPG representative position. And she will be introducing the challenges that we face in our business activities. And now we have a Professor Seong at Seongshin Women's University. So she's an expert in economy, and she will be joining from online. And she will be introducing the financial performances of women in business sectors. So now let me hand over my microphone to the Ambassador, Professor Berg.
Thank you very much. And let me start out by thanking you all for being here today. I'm very privileged with such an audience, such a panel, and all of those following this online as well. I'm very happy to be here because today you are raising a very important issue, and this year's subject at the Jejuporam is sustainable peace and inclusive prosperity, and those are important words, but words that we need to fill with meaning, and I hope that can be part of what we can achieve this morning. Coming from a country that has had gender equality and gender balance on top of the political agenda for many years, I am both happy and honored to be here with you today and sharing some thoughts and experiences on how we have tried to create a more balanced and sustainable society, and thus what we think has become a better society. There are a number of different indexes and surveys showing how far gender equality has come in different countries. And many rank Norway among, if not the most gender equal country in the world. And not least the United Nations Development Programme ranks Norway always at the very top or among the top 2-3. That is flattering, and it shows that we have come a long way. And as an example, this is a photo from one of the many press conferences during the pandemic we have experienced over the last year and a half. And here you can see my Prime Minister in the blue jacket, our Foreign Minister on the far right, the Minister of Trade and Industry, as well as the Minister of Justice. And there's a man listening to them, of course, as well. They're all heavyweight ministers, all women. But this is not an unusual picture at all. And I am happy to state, I don't think anyone in Norway even would stop and think about this picture. This is our normal. We have come a long way. But like in the Republic of Korea and most other countries, challenges still remain, and women face more obstacles than men. And I will come back to that a bit later. But as a response to these challenges, several efforts have been made to facilitate for gender equality in Norway. We have passed legislation, we have made investments, but maybe even more important, we have, I think, managed to change culture and the way we think and the way we behave. And let me start with legislation. In 2003, Norway introduced regulations that made all listed and larger private companies, they had to reserve at least 40% of its board members for women. That was a dramatic proposal that created an outcry among business leaders and politicians and many men, both in Norway and also abroad. And many said this would ruin income in the companies, and that would lead to a number of unqualified women getting places in boards where they had to make important decisions, and they were not ready for that. And let me also underline, contrary to what we might believe was the case, this proposal was not made by a sort of female, or you can say an extremist minister, for example, of gender equality. No, this proposal was made by a man, at the time Minister of Trade and Industry, a male conservative from our Conservative Party, which was a little bit unusual and perhaps not what we would expect. But his argument was that pluralism in board representation, that is an asset that enables the board to understand and analyze better, and not to forget that a gender-balanced board is more likely to make financially sound decisions. And since then, similar regulations have been introduced in several other countries as well, often creating heavy discussions, but after a while becoming a normal and well-balanced practice. Many men would argue that this is a development that would happen anyway, as a natural change, as a development, and as women advance in senior positions in companies, achieving experience, and then they would get their so-called deserved positions in board management or in management positions in the company. Well, I would say maybe, but how long would that take? We're human, and I'm an optimist, and I try to be positive in all aspects, but we normally are quite hesitant to change. And that doesn't come easy. And our experience showed that even though we had motivation, incentives, training courses, discussions, it didn't help. It could have taken 50 or 100 years to wait for culture, if ever. That's why we decided on legislation, forcing companies to change. And let me underline, the quota did not only promote gender equality through rules and legislation, but I think, as I said, we achieved something far more important. It helped us change hearts, it helped us change minds. And this cultural change, I think, is equally, if not even more important. And quotas such as this managed to send a clear signal. The Norwegian way is gender equality. And through this message, expectations of female participation in boards and female managers have changed, and not just among listed companies. Today, I don't think any company in Norway would or even dare to display its board members as only male or to have only male executives in their company. Equally, no government would dare to appoint only male ministers, and we have had a sort of a more or less 50-50 share for a long time. Gender balance has become the new normal, and no one would think to challenge that approach. But it does sometimes show us that rules and regulations must be changed first, and then culture and behavior will change thereafter. There hasn't been a significant change among high executive leaders, though. That has still taken time. But in government structures, in our companies, there is a very well balanced participation, men and women. And I think, contrary to the outcry among business leaders, it's not easy to see sort of a specific change in economic performance after this 40 rule law was adopted. And it shows that women are just as good or just as bad, we can put it like that, as men to make decisions. The companies are doing just as fine as they did with only men in their boards. Still, the general economic argument for gender equality is quite obvious. As many of you might know, the Norwegian economy has shown a very strong growth over quite a few years. And many observers have a tendency to think that this wealth is a direct result from our natural resources, our energy, our seafood, our maritime sectors. That is not correct. That is not correct. The real background for our economic growth is due to our gender equal labor markets, that women have the same rights, same obligations as men in their work life, and they take active part at the same level as men. And if we are to find the best solutions for the future, we have to draw from a pool of all our resources, perspectives, and talent from our entire population. We cannot only draw of the resources from half our population. Thus, we think that gender equality gives us a comparative advantage, as the most valuable asset in any country is the value of its people. Gender equality is the best investment we can make. This is also supported by the OECD. It drives economic growth, it drives sustainable development. And let me also underline that our efforts to promote gender equality has taught us that it's not enough to focus on women. Gender equality should necessarily go both ways. If we want equality between men and women in the family and in the workplace, we must focus on the role of men and fathers as well. That is beneficial for children and, of course, also parents. But for women to be able to focus on a professional career, we need engaged and committed dads. And I will come back to that in a couple of minutes. But why was this possible in Norway? Well, I think history and culture, of course, plays an important role. Norway has for centuries been an egalitarian society, and there was historically little difference between rich and poor. Many had their income from farming and fishing, meaning that women played an important, just as important part as men in the daily struggle for survival. And that also meant a relatively high degree of social equality, which I think is also the same thing in Korea. Over the past decades, Norway is also characterized by a high degree of trust in the government, the well-developed social security system, and not least, close cooperation between the public and the private sector. But as I mentioned, that was not enough to increase the number of women in management positions. And despite a number of initiatives, networks, programs, the actual change never happened. And on this table, you can see the development during the period where I mentioned, where voluntary programs, initiatives, meetings, networking, education programs were made. Hardly any change until the legislation was changed in 2003. And then we see a rapid increase of women engagement, not engagement, but actual involvement in boards in companies. But we have also seen that quotas are not enough To ensure equal rights, legal initiatives must be supplemented by other measures that support the development that we are looking for. And that's why Norway for many years have invested in the availability of kindergartens that will allow both parents to work at the same level. Flexibility at work, it's possible to leave early. In my previous position in Norway, where I was heading a big department, I was quite normally the last one to leave every day. All my colleagues, men and women, had to go to pick up kids in the kindergarten. The right to have paid leave when your child is ill, both parents. Guaranteed right to return to your position after you have maternity leave, which is very, very important. You cannot lose your job in Norway when you're on maternity leave. Doesn't happen. And you're also part of the yearly salary adjustments, even if you're on leave. That's part of why and what you can rest assured that you will be taken care of also on maternity leave. And you have protection against layoffs. But why do I focus on this? Well, it is also in Norway still the cultural expectation that raising children is a woman's job, whether we like to admit it or not. On average, women spend more time on household chores, are more likely to quit their jobs to take care of kids, and use more of the parental leave compared to men. Therefore, if society, culture, and the gender norms do not follow up on these social developments, women often feel that they are left with having to choose between a professional life and a family life. And for a woman to prioritize family life, there must be a mechanism that assures them that this will not mean the end of their career or their ambitions if they choose to have a family and children as well. It must be possible to combine. It must be possible to choose both. Thus, we need to create a system where women can pursue the same professional ambitions as men, because, of course, women have the same ambitions, should have the same ambitions as men, and at the same time be able to combine job and family life. In Norway, therefore, realized that in order for women to be engaged in work life, have the possibility to be engaged at the same level as men, there had to be a focus on the role of men as well. And part of the solution has been to involve men by encouraging them to take equal responsibility in the household. And let me mention one example. As the objective was to achieve a more gender equal society, there had to be established a framework for men to take more responsibility at home and also care for their own children. And in Norway, a few years back, in 1993, 2% took the full paternity leave, what they could have. But that year, a father's quota was introduced, which reserved a certain amount of the parental leave weeks for the father exclusively. And things started to change. The fathers could not give their weeks, their paternity leave, to the mother, so they were left with a choice: take the paternity leave or lose it entirely. And the result of this speaks for itself today. More than 70% of fathers make use of their full quota, or even more. And the point of this example is to make the word pressure a little more nuanced, as there is a difference between the active use of force and the passive removal of options. The latter doesn't feel as invasive, and it encourages desired behavior rather than demanding it. And the example, in this example, Norway made it easier for fathers to voluntarily choose to stay at home by not giving them the option of transferring it to the mothers. And this has slowly normalized this position. And today in Oslo, or in any city in Norway, you will see men just as often as moms going around with the strollers and the small kids, staying at home with their kids. And they had made them realize they have the same responsibility for the children as the moms. And also, of course, the same rights. And this is a good combination. And I think it would be necessary to include and expect Korean dads to be just as important and take just as much responsibility as the mothers regarding the raising of kids. And they need also, that's my challenge in a way, also to take more responsibility at home. And if household chores were divided more equally, Korean women would not feel that they have to choose between a professional life and a family life. And there are several positive trends in the struggle for gender equality in Norway. And these trends and accomplishments are worth talking about. But there is also a need to address, because we haven't solved everything, not at all. There is some existing challenges. The struggle for gender equality is not entirely over. In shipping, in ICT, in finance, women face, perhaps due to conservative and old-fashioned ideas, greater barriers than in other sectors. And women are still underrepresented in tech areas. And we have a gender-segregated labor market where women tend to work in sectors with lower pay. And as a result, women in average earn 15% less than men still. And there's also more women working part-time than men, making that in a lifetime, they will end up earning less money and also earning less pension rights. So this is something we have to look closer into. And if we are to realize the goal of gender equality, which is one of the Sustainable Development Goals, we must continue, we must do more. But the conclusions from our experience are that change is perfectly possible, but it requires an effort from all the parties that I have touched upon: men, women, governments, businesses. And what we have to ask is, do we have the time to wait for this to happen voluntarily? The experience in Norway is that real change do not necessarily come from the size of governmental spendings, but on the opportunities presented for people to change themselves. And that's the government's job, to facilitate, help facilitate for families. And as the Norwegian Minister of Children and Families said, we want to strengthen families, not control and force them. In conclusion, gender equality is a challenge that requires change of culture. But change of culture often requires some political tools and political incentives. Men, all of us, need to change and take more responsibility. But in order for men like me to change, maybe also the employers need to change. And remember, perhaps, that efficiency is not necessarily how many hours you spend in your office, but it's actually what you get done. That's an important focus. And I think the key is to actually understand, to act, and to support those men who will invest more time in their family life and to help raise their own children. And perhaps also politicians and high-ranking business people should start and pave the way to make it easier. And then I think a range of positive effects are within reach. Gender equality being, of course, one of them, but also more flexible work life, perhaps shorter working hours, more time with family, less stress. And I'm convinced that this will be good for society. And this is what both existing, new, coming generations would want. That's how they want to live their life. And then it also might be possible to solve another huge challenge in many democracies, and of course also here in the Republic of Korea, the need to increase birth rates. We need more children. And all of this might also hopefully create even more happiness. To sum up, gender equality is good for the economy, it's good for society, it's good for all of us. And let's not wait for culture to change, because that takes too long time. We can change behavior through legislation, through culture, through discussions. That is a very good investment. And I think panels like this today, that will help us to move forward, because then we're discussing a very important subject. So once again, thank you very much for the initiative. Thank you for raising the issue. Thank you very much for your attention. 감사합니다.
Thank you for your insightful presentation. In 2003, that was like 20 years ago. And in Norway, they introduced a legislation for more opportunities for females. That was very impressive example. And in particular, what was impressive was that the male in conservative parties, they were leading this movement in Norway, and they realized that that is very important strategy for the national development, and they believed then that will bring more social benefits to society. So that was pretty impressive, and we should learn from that cases in Norway, I think. So we still have a lot of discussions going on, but the case of Norway, we can learn a lot and we can implement the lessons learned from Norway. And moreover, not only this legislation, but the actual changes in families, balanced responsibility between moms and fathers, that will contribute to maintaining the job opportunities for females. That was quite impressive. Now let me hand over the microphone to John Lee. So CEO John Lee has been managing, and he was actually introducing the fund in Korea in relation to the gender equality. So the microphone is yours. Thank you for your introduction. So it is my honor to be here today. So before I go into my presentation, I work as a fund manager in the United States.
왜 이런 펀드를 만들게 됐는지.
And the reason why I came up with this idea of having women fund is because investing in the company, I thought about why some companies are successful. And well, even broader perspective, why some countries are having more and faster economic growth. On the other hand, some other countries are missing opportunities because of the incorrect decisions. So while working for 35 years in the United States, I realized that Korea has a lot of potentials.
이런 생각을 하게 됐고.
So I think maybe, well, it was kind of like polarized kind of culture, so that is why it was happening in that way. The entrepreneurship of younger generation is obvious in the States, but in Korea it's opposite. They want to go for kind of like the sustainable the future. And the financial education is not done for our younger generation. The third one is women issue. Unfortunately, all these three factors are the lowest level among the world. So I came to Korea and I found that the gender issue was rising. And then actually the male was kind of discriminated in the opposite way and like that. Well, actually half of the population is women. Then how can we make a good use of our women resources? It will bring tremendous economic growth if we use our female resources well. They're running the business with only male, I think it's a wrong idea. So we have to go in the fundamental way. Not like we are giving special treatment to women. It's kind of like very the basic and the obsolete kind of thinking. Well, women issue is good if we treat that in the business. It's good. It's kind of sitting back and kind of like in a passive manner. So when I make a decision to invest in certain company and then I look into the female matters, what kind of women policy does it have? What kind of like business manner it has to work with women? I'm not saying, well, they are in favor of women, but it's essential for every company's growth. Some companies have only male management, but the other company is making creative thinking with women and men together. Well, of course, I think it's obvious if you have women in the board, and then you can make better decision because you can hear a lot of voices from both the genders. So if you have these two, only male or the male and female, and then I think I would invest in the second one. In the past, the ratio of women was very low, and then not investing in the company, it's kind of passive investment because I'm not investing in the company. But well, I changed my attitude in a kind of active way. So I suggest certain companies that you have to hire more women and put them in the certain like position if you want to make better earnings and if you want to get investment. If the company has higher ratio of women employees and then it has higher the ROE, well, we should not recognize this as a kind of like just only gender issue, but it should be kind of obvious concept or natural one. So that is why we decided to introduce the Women Fund. So my company is selecting companies with proactive thinking to hire more women. It's not because of the necessity. It is just natural, and it's good for my company to invest in this kind of company in favor of women hiring. And with our members of the board, we made this decision. And many times I visit the pension fund and emphasize this, but all of those fund managers, they are all male. So they're saying that, oh, yeah, it's a good idea, but they're not recalling. They're not calling me back. So I think if this culture is settled, and then I think it takes like 50 or 100 years maybe. So $50 or $100, the amount is not important, but if it goes only in this way, in a passive manner, it takes forever. I'm not like promoting my fund, but I'm saying that if we focus on this kind of financial means to promote the gender equality, I think it can make some strides and achievement, and it can draw more companies to hire more women. Actually, the whole world knows that the business environment for women is not good. And then I got a call from the other companies across the world. How did you decide to make this kind of fund? Because I know that the women are not the hired in Korea. So I got this kind of call. And then there was some other like discussion to promote this kind of funds, but that deal was not made at the first place because it was difficult to get investment from other investors because I had to make 5 billion Korean won to start this fund. And then after the COVID-19, many people became to get interested in ESG, and then suddenly a lot of injection was made to our company, and that is how I could start this fund. I'm saying this in the earnest. I'm not saying that we need a lot of money from one person, but I'm just saying that the actual change should be made in the Korean business circle. To do that from younger generation and to the older generation, all of those Korean people have to get some interest in opening the fund accounts and making some investment in this so that they can use this when they are retired like that. If we do not have like financial interest and if we do not invest in women and gender equality, our future is not positive, I think. So regrettably, I think we are missing good opportunities if we don't grab this opportunity. We have to address this population issue. I think the birth rate and all other population related issues are connected to gender equality. If we can address this gender equality issue, I think we can have more babies to be delivered to Korea. And decision makers in the business circle and the police circles, I think they should focus on this. And if you want to invest in this fund, you can actually subscribe this fund with our mobile app. It's the first trial in Korea. The amount is not important. I'm just promoting my fund at this moment. So, well, there are 600,000 the subscribers to my fund. So my goal is 2 million. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. John Rhee has been deeply engaged in achieving gender equality in Korea. He's actually very much contributed in Korea. So for companies to achieve the gender equality, so they have this list of the companies who has a better performance in terms of gender equality, and that companies gets more investment, and that creates the virtual cycles. So I myself actually be part of that fund since it was introduced in the market, and now I have more than 40% of the profits. So thank you personally. And he's not really only thinking about the profits, because that women's fund will have better and more profitability in the future, because he have this passion and he believes in this, and that goes hand in hand with the strategy. And gender capitalism can be a financial market. That is what his belief. So I really respect John Rhee. Thank you for your insightful speech. So now let me hand over my microphone to Gender Equality Policy Administrator, Hyun. Hello, my name is Hyun. I'm Gender Equality Policy Administrator of Jeju Special Self-Governing Province. So this is our second session having the gender equality subject. So this is the only department in Korea actually. The Governor 1 decided to have this teams in order to raise the gender sensitivity across the entire organization. And for the actual administration work, we take consideration of gender equality. So this is the second session in Jejuporam, and I think that is very meaningful. And personally, I'm very happy to be part of this discussion. And the presentation of the ambassador was quite thought-provoking, and we have a lot of things to learn from their cases. So all the ideas of other panels have a lot of things that we can learn and can be reflected a lot in Jeju administration as well, in terms of policy changes and development. So Jeju could be a very small part of the country. However, since we have this gender equality policy administrator, we have seen a lot of changes. So let me briefly introduce what changes have been made in Jeju. So as you can see from the slide, this is the Global Gender Gap Report. So in order to achieve the gender equality, we thought that it may take like 100 years, but because of the COVID-19, it will be even later, like 35 years more. More than 35 years will take longer. So that will be like more than 135 years. So this is the global gender gap report. So this shows that still there's a long way to go in for Korea. So we have been engaging a lot of activities to narrow the gender gap. So this is the Gender Equality Index in regions in 2020, and in Jeju, out of 16 provinces, we are ranked at the top. And the core is that we have the highest participation of female workers. And that is the reason why I have this subject of the session. So we have the highest participation rate of female, but unfortunately, the salary gap is still high. And female workers are working hard, but female representativeness is still not really showing encouraging results. And in Jeju, we don't have a basic local government, so we don't really have like conditions to come up with the female representativeness in administration or the political ratio. So we try to raise the percentage of the female representativeness in these areas, but it is true that we have a long way to go still. And this is the female participation in economies and in public sector. This is the female representativeness, where still we have a long way to go. So Jeju has been working hard to improve the gender equality and in terms of policy development. So let me briefly introduce this. So before the organization is set up, we set up the direction of the policy, and that may not be accepted by other organizations or teams. But since we have this dedicated teams under the governor, so that greatly helped to come up with the policies and push for the policies. So policy decisions and businesses, we have this process to review whether those processes or projects can be carried out in terms of gender equality. And all the head of the other departments and the people in charge of project, they are kind of responsible for achieving gender equality so that they can be embedded in carrying out their project and work. And we have come up with the comprehensive measures to raise the awareness of the gender equality as well. So this is the comparison between 2014 and 2019. So as you can see, the females are more participating in economic activities, and they are more working for the regular work. And we have two different like initiatives. The first one is like more like Jeju. So we have 7 different policy areas where we have invested like 45 billion Korean won. And the next one, the third, female-friendly city basic plan, we have invested approximately 531 billion won. So under these 2 initiatives, we have been making cooperation in every stakeholders. And this also shows that the equal participation in making policies. So both men and women can be participated in coming up with policies in Jeju. And down the road, Jeju will be continuing these initiatives and work. So Jeju was the first in Korea. So everything was new and challenging, but thanks to the willingness and determination of the governor and every other stakeholders, we have been achieving a lot. And others are benchmarking Jeju cases, but we will be playing more important role in the future. That's our determination. Thank you for listening. Thank you. So Jeju was the first one who has this dedicated teams for the gender equality in Korea. So that is the very advanced cases, I think. So the central government's effort is important, but the local government is also important because that's like a gross movement from the bottom. So thank you for your introduction of Jeju cases, and I truly hope that this can be spread into the entire country. Now, let me introduce the Dean Lee-Hyun. She's the Dean at the Kookmin University. So microphone is yours.
네, 안녕.
Hello. I updated my slides, so maybe the booklet is a little bit different from what you have. Please bear with that. An economist declares the Women Index every year, and Korea is ranked at the bottom, and I think you all know that. Gone Earth was the title. Go North means the Norwegian countries or other European countries, because the Northern European countries have higher the gender equality. So that is why the Korean ambitious girls should go to Norway or other European countries. That was the topic. And the glass ceiling in Korea is kind of a bulletproof the glass ceiling. So that was the expression in the article. So today the ambassador from Norway shared the good thoughts and ideas, and thank you very much for your presentation. And when we say the gender equality oriented management, it may be led to the discrimination or kind of a controversial surrounding the gender equality. But the start point should be the inclusiveness and diversity. So no matter what kind of characteristics the company has or the organization has, every person should be able to exercise their capability. That is the inclusiveness and diversity. But Korea is not good at gender equality, so that is why we are saying, but actually the gender equality is just a sector of the inclusiveness and variety. So that is why I mentioned this. The Fortunes or the Forbes, they are saying that the companies, the DNI is doing well, is like this. So they are announcing these because many corporations are taking this as an important factor for business running. The Harvard Business Review announced an article the August 19th, and they looked into this diversity, but the inclusion sector got worse actually. There were three distinctive items. That was the microaggression. It's very tiny one. HR or the report, it's kind of difficult to change this very little thing, but still it's a very aggressive one. And the exclusion is another thing, the discrimination or not respecting, like disrespecting, like that. So these are found during the COVID-19 the crisis. Then how come it's not working well? Many corporations are working in this manner, but the important point is the leaders' priority. This diversity and inclusion is not the priority for the leaders, and many resources are not allocated in this matter. And it's difficult to measure. Without measurement, it's difficult to improvement that matter. So that is why the D&I related factors are found in this way so far in various articles. So regarding the D&I, let's look into that. So various members came into an organization. There are 4 ways. The first one is differentiation. So you separate these people so that they can exercise their whole capability. But this one is not affecting the whole organization. Only small department is doing this well. The exclusion is really literally excluding these people. Then they cannot exercise this. And the next one is the assimilation. So they have to accustom themselves to the majority of the organization. Then the values or their capability, their uniqueness cannot be reflected to the organization. So it's difficult to achieve certain creative goals. The next one is inclusion. So each person can input their unique perspective and capability to draw the best result of the organization. That is the inclusion. And the topic for this Jeju is the inclusiveness and the co-prosperity. So that is why it's very important. So that is why I want to talk about gender-related issues in depth today. With regard to gender issues, many global companies are doing well. What's the reason behind them? It's not because they are giving favorable treatment to women, but it's their organizational strategy. They want to go for the sustainable development and growth. So it's their survival strategy. As CEO John Lee mentioned, that the investing in companies with women favorable atmosphere, that's the issue. So gender equality is expanded, and Bloomberg is announcing the Gender Equality Index every year. There are 5 sessions. The female leadership and talent pipeline. How many female talents do they have? The second section is equal pay. Even though women are taking part in the organization, but income gap is huge, so the organization has to go for paying equally to both women and men. Even though you hire women, but if you don't pay equally, then, well, they will be excluded eventually. The third one is inclusive culture. If there's a haze or if members cannot be treated fairly, then it happens. But if that happens, then what kind of steps can be taken to address that issue? And how can we make the pro-women brand? That's the next one. So pro-women trend is well seen in Nike and P&G. So I'll share those cases. I have only 1 minute. So since when Nike took the women at the center of the sports? It was actually the very beginning. The Nike was the goddess of winning. And in 1970s, a legislation titled 9 has passed. So all women can take part in their the sports upon their wish, whether it is like basketball, like a marathon or whatever. Previously, it was not allowed for women. So each sport event had each sport events organization, they decided to invest in all those athletes and sport players. That is why Nike is showing this sport, the stars, and it has the more goals to achieve. So it seeks for inclusive culture and engagement. So how can we make them to feel that they are engaged and include? So Nike has an ambition to achieve 100% of the index. There are several questions to measure this kind of the achievements. Oh, there's someone who is taking a picture, so that is why I waited a little bit. And there will be suppliers to Nike. How can we make the share of the supplier in a diverse manner? So that was the other thing. And next group is P&G. I think I don't have to explain this because P&G is doing this so well. P&G is holding this campaign for a long time. Women at Work, Myth and Reality. It's in your booklet, so I think you can read this. So system should be fixed, not the women. And also the image surrounding the leadership, it has to change in the actual manner. So that is why P&G is trying to achieve the 57% of women the management. And this is the graph showing that these companies are achieving this kind of gender equality aspect so well. We have CEO John Lee here, but only John Lee, that's not enough. Only one person is not enough. We have more. We need more. We need 100,000 John Lees so that we can have more male supporters. I really hope that can be possible. Thank you for listening.
So, just like the expert in management, you introduced a new trend in business and management area. So that 5 session, that was very meaningful, I think, for Korea. And the case of Nike, they were kind of pioneer in championing the females' capability. So they were using these marketing skills to change how people think very slightly, subtly. That was very impressive. And as ambassador introduced, the quota system changed the people's awareness and perception, and so did Nike. So that was quite impressive in terms of strategy, and that greatly contributed to the development and growth of company. So why don't we have companies like P&G and Nike? It's really hard to find such companies. So it is my hope that we can find more companies who embrace this concept of gender sensitivity and gender equality. So now let me introduce the President Seoji. She's from Jeju, from KPMG. So President Seo, the microphone is yours. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So Women in Innovation. I'm from Women in Innovation. So it was established in 2007 in order to nurture a female leader. So we try to nurture more middle managers in the company. And so today, the KPMG and other companies' cases and where we are standing in terms of gender equality and the challenges. Let me introduce those ideas. So this one here, this is the gender gap of Korea as opposed to technological competitiveness. So in Korea, Korea is the Korea ranked fifth in terms of technological competitiveness. This is the report from UNCTAD. But in terms of gender gap, Korea is outside 100. And for 10 years, the World Economic Forum introduces a global gender gap for each country. And the first one is the Iceland, followed by Nicaragua and Albania and Korea. So this one shows the changes in 10 years, and it shows that they have been achieving a lot of improvement. But Korea, as you can see here in the orange line, Korea is staying the same outside 100. And in terms of gender gap index, it includes the economic participation and opportunities, but in that area, Korea ranks very low, as you can see, because we have a low participation in economic sectors from female perspective. And this is the example of the 30-50 club, meaning the countries that has the $30,000 of national income and a population of 50 million. And as you can see, they have this certain types of graph shape. So in terms of distribution, they have this kind of graph shape, but if you see the Korea's case, we have this M-shaped graph. So at the ages of 35 and 39, they are kind of forced to leave their jobs because of the child rearing activities in the family. And if we compare to the Asian countries where the situation is no different. So if, you see this like 10 countries here from Asia. So the proportion of female in the board of directors. So this is the McKinsey report in 2012. So Korea comes almost flat last. So from college graduates and they enter into the company, and the ratio that they become like a C level in the companies. So 40% of females are graduating from colleges, and 40% are working as like a entry-level experts. But only from there, 6% are promoted to the middle and high executives in company, because they do have they have to leave the company because of like a family matters. And from there, it provides the implication that where we should pay more attention in terms of having more female executives. And this is how many female executives have in Korea in terms of 500 companies. So this number should be reported, and as you can see, it's slightly increasing, but still it's not good enough. And 500 companies in terms of sales, only 181 companies have female executives. That's just 52%. And even there are companies that don't have any female executives. It's not just board of directors, the executives, they don't have female executives. And the proportion is only standing at 4.8%. And what's interesting is that it differs from by sectors and industry types. So female workers, female executives are working in marketing sectors, but less female workers can be seen in financial areas. So that shows that there's a kind of sectors that has more female executives and less female executives. So there was data-based examples, but now this is from the policy perspective. So this is how diverse and how fair Korean companies in terms of gender equality. So this is the result of survey in 2018, published by Korean Female Policy Institute. So they asked what kind of, if they have felt any discrimination in the organization, and the highest portion responded that they felt discrimination in terms of promotion and when they are reallocated in their jobs or roles and responsibility in the organization. And they responded that when they are trying to get jobs, they felt the most or highest or largest discrimination. And they are asked why the discrimination exists, and they responded that because the organization is more focused on men. That's entrenched in their way of thinking. That's what they said. And they also said that there are some females that they are not trying to do the jobs that can be difficult for female workers. So that's kind of interesting response too. So in the same report, it was asked what kind of policy are needed to improve this. And female respondents responded that the social awareness should be raised and there's to be proper policies. And when they are asked what kind of policies are needed, they said that there should be some supporting systems to achieve the balance between work and family lives. And they said that there should be more programs to support female workers' balance between work and family. So this is the example of global best practice. So there has been a lot of initiatives to achieve the balance in terms of gender equality. So a lot of global companies are designating the chief diversity inclusion organizer, and they're having diversity committee. So 70% of Fortune 500 companies have CDIO to change the organizational culture. So I think I'm having, well, let me accelerate my presentation. So as Dean Lee said, diversity is also important. In order, inclusive organizational culture is very important to have a intended performance in organization. And the reason why I put inclusion in front of diversity is because it's that much important. So in terms of Google, they have a lot of education and training in terms of unconscious bias, where our brains are very responsive. So they are really kind of stick to the prejudices about gender roles. So it is really difficult to change how our brains are changing. So let me briefly conclude my presentation. So based on my career and what I felt over the past years, well, we haven't seen really desired changes. That's our reality right now. And COVID-19 has made it even worse. As Ms. Lee mentioned, this is not easy. This is a huge challenge. And the sustainable growth for companies, it's not something that we can choose. It's what we have to do. It's a must. So the crisis of Korea is to waste the capability of female workers. That is the interview of the Professor Gerald a while ago. So Korea has more than 550 million population, but it's like Korea is only using half of the entire population. So it is really important to make a conscious effort in order to break the subconscious prejudice. So for companies and for organizations, in order to increase the number of female workers, they have to do specific KPI within certain timeline, unless it will be difficult to achieve what we intend. Thank you for listening. So thank you. I think she has a lot more things to say, and it was quite thought-provoking and informative. And she was introducing a lot of statistics and policies as well. Thank you for your presentation. So it is important. I mean, the willingness and determination of the CEO of the organization is really important. So last but not least, we have Professor Seong Ho-young at Seongsin Women's University. The floor is yours.
저는 그
Hello. I sent actually my recorded clip because 9 minutes was too short. I think you can play my video.
2021
It is my honor and pleasure to join as a panelist for this Jeju Forum. I'm a member of the WIC and I'm a professor at Seongsin Women's University. And ambassador and all panelists, my thanks goes to all of you. So I would like to talk about the impact of women board directors on financial performance. So first, why gender diversity matters, and gender diversity and firm performance. Lastly, I would like to share some Korean cases, and the final one would be the policy implementation. Every year, there's a Day of Women, and then Economist announces the glass ceiling index for OECD member countries. Since 2013, the Korea ranked at the bottom for 13 consecutive years. Of course, the women board ratio is at the bottom. So the gender equality and economic growth, what kind of relation does it have? There are some top 5 countries with glass ceiling index, including Japan and Korea. So I compared these 7 nations. So the LFPR gender gap and gender wage gap, WMP, WB, and WIP, and GDP per head. You see the top 5 nations. You see the WOB is higher than 35%, but Korea is less than 5%. I also compared that the gender ratio of member of the parliament and also the GDP per head was looked in, and then actually the GDP per head for Korea is higher than the average. So even though the Korea is ranked at the 10th for the global economy, but this kind of the gender gap is sustaining. And there were some like preliminary studies on this gender board diversity and firm performance. There were some the research results. Some are saying positive, some are saying negative. They're all mixed. So all these studies are saying that it will enhance the firm performance and it will increase the creativity of the board diversity, and eventually it can improve the firm performance. So it's kind of empirical base and evident. However, the positive relation between the gender board diversity and firm performance could not be seen in some research studies. So I will show you some of those studies. So from this slide, as long as the gender diversity is higher, there can be more the conflicts among the members of the board. And the quota can maybe exacerbate the firm performance because the inexperienced members can be as a member of the board. So there is no clear evidence between the gender board diversity and firm performance. But we have to take a look at the fourth one. So it is suggesting the U relations. So if the female ratio is higher than 30%, then it can have positive impact for the firm performance. So that suggests that 3 out of 9, that's much better for have better decision making among the members of the board. You have to persuade other members, but women are so small that it's very difficult. So that's the basic ground to adopt the quota should be higher than 30%. So to analyze the relation between these two, I looked into financial supervision services data, and I looked into the revenue for the higher ranking companies, and I analyzed these companies as you can see on the slide. So you see the relations between these different performance and gender diversity. The yellow one is showing that it has only one female member, and the second one is that only the male. So the first one is the companies with women more than one executive. The second one is companies with women more than one on boards. And I used the ROI. So both graph is showing that the companies with women executives or the members of the board, they are showing higher performance. And next, the OECD's, the Women in Work Index is shown in this slide. And the participation of women and also the weighted, the average is used to make this graph. It looks similar to the previous table because the data collection time and the data collecting institution is different. So you should take a look at the last one, the GDP impact. GDP impact is 14%. So if Korea can have similar gender equality level as Sweden, then the gender income gap can be addressed. Then we can achieve higher the GDP growth. then can it be possible to increase the gender equality and human capital? So it's a data from the PISA and also the GGI. So I looked into the relations. So science announced culture, gender, and math article in 2018. And I compared that with the recently announced data I mentioned before. So in the culture in favor of men, and the gender equality problem is being addressed. And women can have better understanding of math and reading, and then their gender equality can be achieved. So gender gap can be narrowed. So even though women are studying well, if they have less opportunity to be hired and work, then they would achieve the human capital in a less manner. So the gender equality is the best investment to achieve the further growth and have better human capital. So we looked into the sustainable for sustainable economic growth, what kind of gender equality and financial firm performance can be related. So to address this, the gender equality issue in the board, the general conception in the society should be changed. So you're qualified and you're experienced, then you can be hired as the women board. So this kind of program should be explored and established so that the policy should be implemented to that purpose. Thank you very much for listening.
교수님 감사.
Thank you, Professor Seong. She was brief, but she was introducing very informative statistics and the female directors on finance performance, and that was very easy to understand. Thank you for your presentation. Because of time constraints, we don't have much time left. Well, it's not really a discussion, but they were going deeper to share their ideas in this important issue from their perspective. And I think they have some questions, but because time constraints, I think we can have two questions. So if you have any questions, you can just raise your hands. So we have Dr. Cho. Well, I think there's a technical problem. The interpreter cannot hear anything. Interpreter cannot hear anything from the floor. Again, I think we have a technical problem in interpretation booth. The interpreters cannot hear anything.
I'm sorry about that. I think there was a lack of sound for the interpretation. I heard but that might be fixed. But as far as I understand, the question is whether any comments on the Anti-Discrimination Act was that in Korea. I think as an ambassador, it's always difficult to. I think every country has to find its way forward. I think my most important mission in a panel like this is to share insights and share experience from how my country has dealt with some of these issues. But let me just say that I think it's a very interesting discussion, and also in these days, because I think as has been quite clear in the different interventions today as well, I think a good society, a green society, and a society based on growth, economic growth, social growth, that is based on equality, and not only equality between men and women, but equality for everyone. It shouldn't matter who you love, how you look like, anything. So of course, anti-discrimination is very important. I think that as a general remark. But of course, it's I think it's a very interesting discussion going on right now. I was attending a meeting just a couple of weeks ago in the Human Rights Commission in Seoul, where the topic was on the agenda, of course, as well. So it is a very interesting issue. I think I will leave it at that. But of course, that equality, that's a word that needs two lines under. It's extremely important for all of us. I think in all areas, whether it's female or gender equality, or it's sexual equality, or whatever it might be. That is extremely important for I think the happiness in a society. Thank you.
네,
So we have used up all the time that we are given, so we cannot receive any more questions. So there was a technical problems. We apologize for that. Thank you for your understanding. So I think that answers your question, I think. So thank you for your answer, Ambassador, and all the discussants and participants. Thank you for being here out of your busy schedule for a long time. And for those of you who are attending from YouTube, thank you for your interest. So that concludes our session for gender equality. Thank you. So this concludes the session. So we are going to take a break, and from 1:30, we will have another session on institutional approach for the activation of a local municipal policy system hosted by Jeju Municipal Police. Thank you.